Hello everyone, welcome to the final episode of Cooking with Miss Carlson.
So this is day 81, our last day of school, so our last day of Cooking with Mrs. Carlson. We will try to do some videos throughout the summer, just periodically throughout the summer when we have a new recipe we want to share with you. So if you haven't already, you can subscribe to our YouTube channel. Just underneath of this video, you can subscribe to us and it will send you notifications to let you know when we do post a new video. We really appreciate you watching us throughout the last 81 days. Today we're going to show you how to make Long John donuts. Today is National Donut Day, so we thought this was a fitting way to end. This is a homemade donut recipe that we will fry these donuts, and then we're going to fill them with custard filling and top them with different kinds of frosting. So the first step that you need to do is take 1 tablespoon of yeast and put it in a measuring cup that contains 1/4 cup of warm water. We're also going to add into that a tablespoon of sugar. Oops, wrong container. And then we're just going to let that sit for about 5 minutes. Right after your yeast and water and sugar have sat for about 5 minutes or so, we're going to add in 1 cup of warm milk, 1 egg. Go ahead, you can put it in the measuring cup. Okay. This is 1/2 cup or 1 stick of softened butter. I'm going to add that right in as well. Make sure it is pretty soft or close to melted because it's going to have to get mixed up into the dough. All right, we've got our egg. And we need 1/4 cup of sugar. And 1/2 teaspoon of salt. And then what we're going to do is just kind of mix this together, and then we'll slowly add our flour to this 1 cup at a time. We'll need 3.5 cups of total flour for this recipe. And I'll add 1 cup of flour to this, mix with my wooden spoon, and then turn my mixer on with the hook attachment and add the other 2.5 cups, 1 cup at a time. 3 cups of flour. And 3.5. After you let your dough knead for a couple of minutes, you're left with a pretty sticky dough. That's okay. Put it in your pan, grease the pan, and then just let it rise for an hour. While our donuts are rising, we're going to go ahead and make our custard. So to do that, we're going to start by heating up 2 cups of milk. Just in a saucepan on the stove. Just want to get this kind of simmering. Meanwhile, you're going to put in a mixing bowl 1 whole egg and 5 egg yolks. The easiest way to just get the yolk, take like a measuring cup or something, act like you're cracking it in half, and then just transfer the yolk back and forth between your shells as all of the egg whites fall into the measuring cup, and then you're just left with the yolk. So we're going to add 5 yolks. Okay, so once you have your 1 whole egg and then 5 egg yolks, we're going to add in 1/4 cup of cornstarch, and 1/2 cup of sugar. So there's 1/4 and 1/2. Then we're just going to whisk this up until it's smooth. Okay, so this is the consistency you're looking for once you have your eggs and egg yolks and cornstarch and sugar mixed together. Now we need to temper these eggs. What I mean by that is we need to put some of our hot milk into our egg mixture and mix that together just so that the eggs kind of come closer to the hot milk temperature so it doesn't start to cook our eggs before we dump this into our saucepan. So we just want to whisk in a little bit of this mixture just so we don't shock the eggs when we put them into the pan. I'm going to put about 1/2 cup of this in. Just whisk that in. Maybe 1 more little scoop. Just squeezing. Okay, so now what you'll have is our egg mixture is a closer temperature to the milk before we dump it in here. That way your eggs won't curdle and start to become like scrambled eggs. So we're going to mix this in with the rest of our milk. And then we'll wait for this to boil. Okay, so as soon as it starts to boil, it gets very thick like this. You can go ahead and remove it from the heat, and then we are going to whisk in a 1/4 cup of butter, which is 1/2 of a stick. This butter should be softened, and then we're going to put in 1/2 teaspoon of vanilla. And then that's all there is to making the custard filling for our Long John. So we'll just whisk this up until it's all incorporated, and then we'll set it aside until our donuts are done. So you can get your oil heating up to about 375 degrees. I'm just using canola oil for this, but vegetable oil would work just fine. Okay, to make our maple frosting for our donuts, we're going to start by putting in 2 tablespoons of butter, and then 1/4 cup of brown sugar. Just going to whisk those 2 together, and then we're going to add in a little bit of milk. 1.5 tablespoons of milk to this. We're just going to whisk this together on kind of medium-high heat for about 5 minutes until the sugar is fully dissolved in the butter. Okay, after that has cooked down a little bit so that you can't really see those sugar crystals anymore, it'll just take a couple of minutes to boil. You're going to add in 1/2 tablespoon of corn syrup. This is what's going to help our glaze thicken up a little bit. And then we're going to add in 1 teaspoon of maple extract. We can take this right off the heat for right now. 1 teaspoon of maple extract. And then we're going to add a total of 1 cup of powdered sugar, but I'm only going to put in 1/2 cup at a time to make sure that that gets incorporated okay. I'll measure out my full cup, and then just dump about 1/2 in for now. Whisk that in, and then we'll add the other 1/2. And then you can kind of just let this sit until your donuts are ready, but you'll want to stir it or whisk it a couple of times while you're waiting, just so it doesn't harden too much. You can kind of keep it on a low temperature if that helps. But that's all there is to the glaze. That's all ready to go when our donuts are ready. After your dough has had a chance to double in size, we're going to put it out on a very lightly floured surface. Remember, it's a little bit sticky. This dough is a little sticky, and that's okay. You might want to flip it over, put a little flour on top of it. We're just going to roll this out into a rectangle, a very large rectangle, and then we'll cut it from there. So just make sure you've got enough flour under and on top of it so that it doesn't stick. So just roll it out into a rectangle. About the size of a sheet cake pan. All right, once it's rolled into your 12 by 18 inch rectangle, we'll go ahead and cut it in half. And then each half has got to be cut into 6 pieces. So we'll cut it in half. Again, so you've got 4 halves. And then we're going to cut each half into thirds. Okay, so you're left with 12 donuts. We're going to transfer them onto a baking sheet and then cover them and then let them rise for about 30 minutes. Won't take as long for these ones to double in size. All right, so when your oil gets to 375 degrees, we're going to take our donut and just put it in the oil and then let it cook on both sides. So when you start to, you'll want to watch this pretty carefully. It's not going to take too long on each side. As soon as it starts to brown up on one side, you'll flip it over and let it cook on the other side. Okay, so this donut cooked about 30 to 45 seconds on each side. So that's kind of the brown color that you're looking for. Set it out on some paper towel so that the grease can drain fully. And then continue cooking the rest of your donuts, and then we'll fill them. Okay, so then what you're going to do is put your custard filling in a pastry bag and put a wide tip at the bottom. And then you'll poke a hole on one end and squeeze. And then go to the other end. And if it's easier, puncture a hole in yourself first. And then squeeze filling from the other end. So you get filling throughout the whole donut. And then the last step is to take your glaze and just spread some glaze over the top of that. Whoops. And if you want chocolate, you can make chocolate. Essentially, that's all there is to it. Here is the finished product. Maple and chocolate cream-filled Long Johns.